in New York at headquarters in my office, which is such a delight. Today is a moment where we appreciate our staff. We're going to have a gathering for a staff that has worked unbelievably hard to raise an unbelievable amount of money to support our people and our world in a moment of unbelievable need. And so I want to acknowledge all of my colleagues at UJA and all of our volunteer leaders, all of our donors. We have broken every record because our people, our community, has shown up in a record-breaking way. Um, and we know that the need far surpasses even this strength that we've generated. But for a moment, I wanted to pause. And if you know of someone who works at UJA, who has worked at UJA, including my friend, my former colleague, but my always partner in thought and good work, Adrian Tanner, who's here, Penny, who's been our faithful steward and keeping us on track and teaching me every day. Um, there are other colleagues who are here, but I want to acknowledge how lucky I am to be part of this team. And today is a day of saying thank you. It is broadcast 1089, which is also unfathomable for our community, and it is day 277 since October 7th. Um, and as unfathomable things go, that makes no sense. It is more than 9 months, which is a horrific reality. Um, and so what I wanted to do was leverage this week's Parsha, maybe not to give answers, but to allow that unfathomable, irrational, impossible reality to have a home in our text. So here we are in Parshat Chukat, and the word chok is an interesting one. If you know some biblical literature and some language, chok is a kind of law that does not have a rationale. It's in contrast with the word mishpat, which you might consider a rational law. So here are the classic examples. Irrational laws: don't kill, don't steal. Those are examples of laws that we could come to on our own. Laws that societies create. And not only Jewish communities have. The way that chok functions, a mysterious law functions, is like kashrut. You might say that keeping kosher is because of this or because of that, but the Torah never gives a rationale for keeping kosher. The classic example of a chok, of an irrational law, a law that has no discernible explanation, is in this week's Torah portion, the red heifer. Now, we'll talk in more depth about the red heifer, but what I wanted to share was an insight that I learned recently from the chief rabbi of Great Britain, Ephraim Mervis, who himself is quoting Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik of blessed memory. Rabbi Soloveitchik asks the question, why is chok, why is the law of para aduma right where it is in the Torah? Because, in fact, if you look closely, where we just were last week in the Torah portion, we were studying the story of Korach. Korach, the rebellion, is a challenge to authority. And you might say to yourself, a challenge to religious authority is not really answered by a law that seems to make no sense. The law of the para aduma, very roughly, is when someone came into contact with the dead and was no longer able to come close to offering a sacrifice anymore because of ritual contamination. The red heifer, the para aduma, was brought in, and there's a whole strange ritual by which it then helps purify someone else. Now, we will deal with that tomorrow, I think. But the placement of an irrational law is interesting here too. Korach, if you remember, I shared this last week, there's a famous midrash in the Sifrei about what Korach's challenge really was. It says they challenged the authority of Moses and said, you were not actually chosen by God. And they challenged the authority of Aaron, the high priest. You were not chosen by God. But the rabbis embellish the challenge and they make it even more pernicious. Korach is heard to say by the people, at least according to the rabbis. This is not in the biblical text, it's a midrash. Korach says to Moses, well, we are required on garments that have 4 corners to add a patil techelet, a thread that is a special kind of blue. Well, what if I have a 4-cornered garment that is entirely made of that blue? Do I still need to have techelet? And Moses says, yes, you still must. And Korach says, that makes no sense. How about this one? This is what in yeshiva we call a klutz kasha, right? A question that has no graceful response. Well, what if I have Torah scrolls all over my house, in every room, but I don't yet have a mezuzah that has one part of the Torah scroll, a very small part. If I have Torahs filling my house, do I still need a mezuzah on the doorway? And Moses says, yes, you still need a mezuzah. And Korach says, that doesn't make any sense. You're making all this stuff up. And then we go into the para aduma, which no one can look at and give a logical explanation for. It's just strange. There's no other way to look at it. In fact, it's called, the name of our Torah portion, Chukat, which means the strange law of. So Rabbi Soloveitchik, by asking, why is the rule of the para aduma, this chok, this mysterious law, placed right after the challenges of Korach? To show, and this is a beautiful teaching, to show that not everything makes sense. There are things in this world that don't and won't make sense. There are those religious authorities who would say it's all up to God, it makes sense to God. I would call this heresy if you'd like. I would say that there are things that don't make sense even to God. Because how could the reality that we're in make any sense, even to God? There are those who go to a shiva home and they offer explanations. I consider that, hopefully well-intentioned but clumsy at best. There are no answers to these questions. How can this be? A chok is a law that has no rationale, but our world includes actions that are not mitzvot, not positive actions, commands, that are also irrational. And in this moment, 277 days after the unfathomable horrors of October 7th, which the world seems too ready to forget, and we, including I, we are too ready to compartmentalize into what happened, not what's happening. 9 months later, friends, we are in a moment that is no more understandable than anything that has been. And to watch Israel's government struggle over the possibility of bringing home the hostages. Just watch Israel's population for the last 9 months make very clear its intention. Israelis of many different stripes, families of Muslim kidnapped people, Muslim hostages, and Jewish hostages, people whose grandparents and parents and brothers and children have been held hostage, people who have lost loved ones showing up for other people whose loved ones might still be alive. None of this makes any sense. And I take, if not an answer, not an explanation. Remember, in a shiva house, you don't really offer explanations. You sit and you let the person who is grieving speak. I've watched at rally after rally after rally the beauty of bearing testimony and showing up in solidarity, in support, and in mobilization for those whose family members are still held hostage. We as UJA have had countless meetings, conversations, rallies, trips, solidarity missions. The staff of UJA will be going, some of us will be going in 20 days to Israel on a staff solidarity mission. Our call right now is to deny the contextualizing of October 7th, is to deny anyone the right to explain anything. There is no explanation for this. There is a response. And yes, the response has been complicated, but the response has always been and remains necessary. As Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in the north are simply arms of Iran. This is all ongoing and all unfathomable. I've had countless conversations, given the uptick in anti-Semitism here in the United States and around the world, where people have asked me, so why do they hate us so much? And even though I've got books on anti-Semitism on my shelf, any answer to that is also not correct. There's no answer. The reality that there has been anti-Semitism, there is anti-Semitism, and most likely, even as we return it to the sewers where it belongs, there will be anti-Semitism, is a recognition that sometimes things don't make sense. And we have to demand a world that does. We have to fight for a world that will. The para aduma, the red heifer, makes no sense. It does things. The red heifer's placement, according to Rabbi Soloveitchik, is there to remind us that Korach's questions last week about the things that don't make sense, his challenge to any religious authority because it's irrational, the answer to that is more mystery, not an answer. I don't know why. I don't know why. And we are called as a people to not explain it away, but to respond to this forcefully, to say to the irrational hatred that continues to face our people, and as some of us are pointing to the terrible attack on a children's hospital in Ukraine by Russia, the unfathomable evil that continues in this world should not be explained, it must be responded to. I wish everything made sense. I really do. But in this week's Torah portion, we have a response to that, which is not everything makes sense. When we accept that and we're able to face a world without dignifying the irrational with some kind of constructed context, that's the first step into understanding what the gift of the para aduma is. The red heifer is there to tell us there is a way forward even when the world doesn't make sense. So, I know I didn't tie things up in a ribbon. I often wish I could. In this moment, I know that I can't. But not tying it up in a ribbon might be our way of bringing the para aduma power of this strange red heifer, forward into the world. So let's take a breath. We will respond over and over, as Arlene just wrote, with care. We will respond with care, with love. May this world one day make sense, or a little bit more sense. So, let's send our hearts to the east on this 277th day since October 7th, friends. Let's sing. Kol od balevav pnima nefesh Yehudi homiya ulefatei mizrach kadima ayin letzion tzofia Olo avda tikvatenu Hatikva bat shnot alpayim Liot am chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim Liot am chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai. See you tomorrow, my friends. Take care.